Hey everyone. So this is a little bit of a different video today. One of the things I do a fair amount off and on that I don't go into on my channel is safe lock manipulation. And there's a couple reasons I don't go into it. The biggest one is probably that it's just incredibly boring to watch. It's a very data-driven exercise that wouldn't be interesting to make a video about. But this lock is actually one that's special to me. It's the very first lock I ever manipulated open, and I was able to get it open without knowing the combination, which is really cool. And so I'm going to mount it. So this will be a video kind of about how to mount a safe lock. Now, for those of you who have been around locks for very long, you certainly know about Lockcracker. And you'll probably even recognize his logo here. These are some really nice mounts for safe locks that he made for me. I was very frustrated that I couldn't find a nice mount, and I got in touch with him, and he went ahead and put together some drawings, some computer models, 3D models of it, and we went back and forth a couple times, and we settled on this design, and really just couldn't be happier with what he produced for me. Fantastic lock mounts. He was even kind enough to engrave the tumbler manipulation stand on there. So we'll be mounting this lock to this. Really the process is the same if you're mounting it to a 2x4 or anything else. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out which direction we're going to put the box, the lock box, on the mount. And now that matters because if it's upside down, 0 will be in a different position than if it's right side up. And you can see on this is called the cam, there are little indicators here for left hand is LH, vertical down is VD, right hand is RH, and VU is vertical up. So correspondingly, you can think of that as the direction you're looking at the lock from. So as I look at this lock from the back, this is a right hand orientation. This is a vertical up orientation. That's a vertical left orientation, and obviously that is a vertical down orientation. In this case, we're going to mount this lock right hand orientation. Setting it on that area and lining up the little holes, we can go ahead and attach it. Now when you mount these locks, you want to do a star pattern. And that way you ensure even tightness of the bolts. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is mount the dial ring. And for that we're going to need the dial ring bushing and the dial ring itself. The dial ring bushing is pretty obvious how it slips in there. And then we'll flip the mount over. And I always try to line these guys up as best as possible. You'll see there's a little rectangular cutout in here. That's so you can get the dial ring aligned if there's some imperfections in where the holes are drilled. Since this is a Lockcracker product, the holes are drilled perfectly, so right in the middle is where we want it. Okay, so now that we have the dial ring mounted and the lock itself, we can go ahead and put the foot on. Obviously this will be different for your mounts. The plastic mounts that you can buy, they come all assembled, so there's none of this required. Alright, it's starting to look like a safe lock. So now our challenge is to get the dial ring installed, and obviously this is going to need to be cut a little bit. So the way to do that is to mark it basically, and so we take the cam and put it in the middle here, and then just thread this through and get the cam going, and kind of as quickly as possible just spin it on. And we have to be careful here if this lock is actually open, but if it wasn't, we'd have to move the lever nose out of the way. And so I kind of snug it up a little bit and then check the dial ring alignment. And this is perfect, really. You can kind of eyeball it, but in some cases it'll be off center like this. And if that's the case, you have to push the dial ring around in order to level out the face of the dial itself. Okay, so we're happy with dial ring alignment. We can go ahead and mark this. And the way we do that is back this out until this little spline keyway lines up with right hand. And it does so when there's no kind of stress on it. And then test for flex. And there's actually a fair amount of flex here. So I don't like that. If I go all the way, it's too tight. And if I bring it back, there's too much flex. So the way to address this is by shimming the lock box itself. And so a lot of people will use a business card or a small piece of plastic. But I didn't plan for that, so I'm going to have to go ahead and make a shim, and I'll be back to install that. Okay, so to the best of my ability, I measured an entire turn of this dial at about 1/2 millimeter. And so I went rummaging through the recycle bin to try to find some plastic shim stock that would be as close as possible to that. And what I came up with was actually this. I made 8 of them. And I came up with about 7/10 of a millimeter, which is too much, I think. So I went ahead and gave them some hydraulic press treatment and got them down to, a shade under 6/10 of a millimeter, which I think is going to be just about right. But let's put it together and find out. Again, we just snug them up, and then using a star pattern, give them a nice twist. You want it pretty snug. Okay, so snug it up and then back it off to the right hand orientation. Check for slop. There's very little. Now, I think this is just about right, so I'm going to put in the spline key temporarily. And then check the action of the lock. And that feels perfect. There's some drag incurred, but that drag is all coming from this little drag controller in here, in the lock mechanism itself. None of it's coming from the pressure applied by the drive cam to the lock body itself. So I am happy with that, and I'm still pleased with dial ring alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the spindle and cut it. Do that with a Sharpie. Just get in there and as close as possible to the drive cam, put a mark on it. I always clean the Sharpie off afterwards, so I try not to get it in the little engravings for left hand and right hand. That's just because I have a problem. Now, one of the things you want to do before you cut the spindle is to actually screw the drive cam back on. And you'll see why in a minute. But essentially, you use it as a tool as kind of a die to reshape these threads after you do the cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this spindle off camera. I'm going to cut it as close as possible to the inside of that mark. And then I'll give it a taper, and I'll be back to reassemble the lock. Okay, so now I have filed a nice little taper on the end of this. And this is the reason you want to have the drive cam threaded on, is because as you file this and as you do the cutting, you've basically damaged these threads and knocked them out of alignment. And so having the drive cam threaded on, as you get to here, you'll notice that it's a little bit, the resistance increases, and what that's doing is it's straightening out the threads. So now the threads have been repaired, and we're ready to go ahead and install this dial permanently. I'm going to go ahead and clean this Sharpie up off of here and give it a little polish, and then I'll be back to install this. Okay, got a little polish put on the drive cam. I also polished the area that rides against the drive cam nose, the lever nose. And we're ready to install this dial for the last time. You can, if you want, apply some silicone grease to this bushing, this dial ring bushing. It's not necessary. This is Delrin, and Delrin is self-lubricating, so I usually don't. Okay, and for the last time, lining up the spline key with right hand. That makes it a little easier to see. And then we will install the spline key for the last time. Now these spline keys that I have are, I don't know if they're Sargent and Greenleaf branded, but I have found that they go in a little bit loose. And so this is just something I've come up with, and if there are any actual safe locksmiths out there, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. But there's two problems with these. First off, they don't go in far enough, and this little bump here rides against the back of the cover, and that causes it to give you a little grinding sound. Second thing is they go in too loose. And so what I do is I put a little bend in them like this, and that seems to make them go in much tighter. So I'm going to do that now. I'll grind off this little nub here, and I'll go ahead and put a bend in it, and then we'll install the spline key. Okay, and with that bend put in the spline key and the notch filed off, we are ready to install the spline key. Again, we want to line up the right hand orientation, and the orientation of this little handle goes outwards towards the drive cam. And already you can feel it goes in a little tighter now that there's a bend in it. Now for pounding in the spline key, I found this file that I have here. It's just a cheap Home Depot file, so I'm not too worried about damaging it. It's pretty good at staying on and knocking it in, and then I use a rawhide mallet on that. And then when I get close to the end, I put it lengthways to give it kind of uniform pressure. All right. Now the spline key is permanently installed, and we can check the action of our dial again, and it still feels good. And the lock is essentially mounted. The only thing remaining to do is to put the back cover on. Hope this was enjoyable to you. Again, I don't go into too much on safe locks, but I think they're pretty cool, and they're a lot of fun to work with. So thank you for watching.